At first, I chalked it up to ambition. She said the new client was demanding. A big corporate account with tight deadlines. Late nights were part of the deal, and I admired her drive. After all, I'd fallen in love with her work ethic, the way she chased challenges without flinching. So when she started getting home later and later, I didn't ask questions. I made excuses. Microwave dinners. Missed plans. The bed cold on her side until well past midnight. I told myself this was temporary. A busy season. A chance for her to shine. But the signs didn't stay quiet for long. First it was the purse, not just expensive, stupidly expensive. A designer label I had to Google to pronounce. She laughed when I asked about it. A gift from the client, she said, almost too quickly. They're generous. Then came the earrings. Small, tasteful, diamond. Performance incentive, she told me with a grin. We hit a big milestone. She never used to care about jewelry. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. So I smiled. Said she deserved it. Pretended the knot in my stomach wasn't tightening each night. She came home a little more distant, a little more drained, or maybe just more detached. She stopped undressing in front of me. Her perfume lingered when she passed me in the hallway, but she barely looked me in the eye. One night, she forgot to take off the new earrings before bed. I lay awake beside her, listening to her breathing, staring at the tiny glint of stone in the dark. I thought about all the little things she'd stopped doing. No more Sunday grocery runs together. No more morning coffee with me in the kitchen. Her phone, once left on the charger by the bed, was now glued to her hand. She even took it into the shower. Still, I kept telling myself stories. Stories about deadlines. Stories about stress. Stories about loving someone who was just a little too busy to show it. But deep down, I'd already started to feel it, the sense that I wasn't part of her life anymore. That I'd been slowly moved into the background of my own marriage. And I didn't know it yet, but the worst part wasn't that she was lying. It was that I had started lying to myself. She said it so casually, like it was routine. Team dinner tonight. Might run late. Then a kiss on the cheek, her bag slung over one shoulder, heels clicking down the hallway. I stood there for a while after the door closed, watching the sunlight on the kitchen tiles, listening to the silence settle in again. Something had shifted. I didn't want to be suspicious, I hated that feeling. But lately, everything she said felt rehearsed. Not like she was lying exactly, more like she was reading from a script she didn't care to make convincing anymore. So I made a decision. It wasn't proud. It didn't feel good. But it felt necessary. I left an hour after she did, driving with the windows down just to keep my hands from shaking. The restaurant she mentioned was upscale, trendy. The kind of place her team loved to post about. I parked across the street, heart pounding like I was the one doing something wrong. But I waited. And waited. No sign of her. I watched couples walk in, watched waiters laugh and open bottles of wine. I watched strangers enjoy the kind of easy, unburdened moments I hadn't felt in months. But I didn't see her. Just as I was about to convince myself I'd misunderstood, that maybe I was overreacting, I saw her car. Not near the restaurant, but in traffic, turning away. Heading east. Nowhere near her supposed dinner. I followed, keeping just far enough back to feel pathetic. She didn't even glance in the mirror. I thought maybe she was swinging by the office. Maybe someone forgot something. Maybe the dinner moved. But the more turns she took, the more obvious it became this wasn't a detour. She drove to a hotel. Not the kind you stop at for a drink. Not even the kind you'd stay at for work travel. It was one of those business plane places off the freeway, all beige lighting and tinted glass. Nothing romantic. Nothing memorable. Just discreet. And she parked. Alone. My hands went cold on the steering wheel. She didn't check her phone. She didn't look around. She walked in like she knew exactly where she was going. Like she'd done this before. I didn't follow her inside. I couldn't. My chest felt like it was filling with cement. The longer I sat there, the more my thoughts twisted in every direction. I didn't know who she was meeting. I didn't know if this was the first time or the 50th. I didn't even know what I'd say if I walked in there. All I knew was this: she'd lied. Not once, not vaguely, but directly to my face. While tying her hair back and grabbing her keys. While smiling like nothing was wrong. And suddenly all the pieces that hadn't made sense, the gifts, the distance, the silence between us, slammed into place like falling bricks. I drove home that night in silence. No music. No plan. Just one sentence echoing over and over in my head. She's hiding something. And whatever it is, it's already tearing us apart. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while she curled into the sheets beside me like everything was fine. She didn't even glance at me. No questions about my evening. No suspicion. Just quiet, easy breathing, the kind you can only manage when your conscience is clear, or completely detached. By morning, the weight in my chest hadn't budged. I wasn't ready, but I couldn't wait anymore. I needed to hear it from her, even if I already knew. She was in the kitchen, pouring coffee, dressed like nothing had happened. Hair in a loose bun. That same necklace she always touched when she was nervous. I stood in the doorway and watched her for a moment longer than I should have. Then I asked, "Are you seeing someone?" She didn't flinch. Just turned to me with a slow blink like I'd asked if the milk had gone bad. "Don't be paranoid," she said, with a smile that twisted something in my gut. "I told you, it's work stuff." Work stuff. Again. The way she said it, so smooth, so practiced. I couldn't tell if it was the truth layered in denial or a lie she'd convinced herself was easier than admitting what she'd done. That smile haunted me for days. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't defensive. It was something worse, empty. Like she was performing the role of wife and had forgotten I was a real person watching. She tapped her phone without looking up and walked past me like the question had never been asked. I just stood there, fists clenched in my pockets, the silence swallowing everything I wanted to scream. I replayed the scene in my head more times than I can count. I kept wondering, what if she wasn't lying? What if I'd misread everything, the earrings, the hotel, the silence? But then the memory of her walking through that hotel door would crash back and my doubts would burn away in shame. She looked me in the eye. She lied. And she did it like she'd done it before. That broke something deeper than I expected. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was how little it seemed to cost her. No hesitation. No guilt. Just a smile and a deflection, like I was some nuisance asking too many questions. I stopped asking after that. Not because I believed her, but because I realized something worse. She didn't care if I believed her or not. I heard the engine before I saw it, low, throaty, expensive. The kind of sound that doesn't belong on our quiet street. It echoed off the houses like an announcement. I stepped out onto the porch, coffee still in hand, heart suddenly pounding. And then there it was, sleek, metallic silver, barely out of the showroom. A car so far removed from our life that for a second I didn't even register it was her behind the wheel. She pulled into the driveway like she'd done it 100 times. Windows down. Sunglasses on. One hand resting lightly on the steering wheel like she just picked up a new purse, not something that cost more than our entire savings account. I stood there frozen. She got out slowly, stretching like she'd just finished a workout, then turned and smiled at me with the same maddening ease she always used when she wanted to end a conversation before it started. "You like it?" she said, slinging her bag over her shoulder. "My boss gave it to me." Like that explained everything. Like it wasn't the most absurd sentence I'd ever heard. My mouth opened, but no words came out. Not because I didn't have questions, I had 1,000. But because I already knew none of them would matter. She walked past me, heels tapping against the stone, her perfume trailing behind. The house swallowed her up before I even moved. I stood there for what felt like minutes, the car gleaming behind me like a monument to everything I didn't understand anymore. A gift from her boss. I tried to process it, tried to tell myself it was some sort of bonus, a company perk, a once-in-a-lifetime reward. But who gets a car from their boss? What kind of work stuff ends in diamond earrings, a designer purse, and now this? I started to feel like I was living in someone else's life, like I'd walked into a version of my marriage that had quietly rewritten itself while I was busy believing in the original draft. That night, I sat in the garage long after she went to bed, staring at the keys she'd left on the counter. I didn't touch them. I just looked. Because I knew, whatever story she was telling me, this was the chapter where it stopped being even remotely believable. It happened in the kitchen, the same place we used to slow dance barefoot on Saturday mornings. The same kitchen where, years ago, she cried into my shoulder after her father's funeral. That place didn't feel like ours anymore. It felt cold, sterile. Like a stage. She was stirring sugar into her tea, tapping the spoon too hard against the mug. Something in her movements was jittery, off. She wouldn't look at me. I had spent the whole night turning things over in my head. The car. The hotel. The smile. There was no more room for denial, no more space to cushion the fall. So I asked again, quietly, as if softness would make the truth hurt less. "Are you with someone?" She let out a short, sharp laugh. Not cruel. Just thin. Like she knew she couldn't keep the act up anymore. "Okay, fine," she said, still staring into the cup like it held the script. "I've been seeing him. For a few months." For a moment, I genuinely thought I misheard her. The words hung in the air like fog, thick and unreal. My brain didn't catch them, not right away. But my chest did. It tightened so fast I forgot to breathe. She didn't stop. "He understands me," she said, finally meeting my eyes. "More than you ever did." It was that line, that awful, quiet line, that broke me. Not the confession. Not even the months part. But that. As if all the years we spent building something together had been a misunderstanding. As if I'd been a bad translation of the person she actually needed. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was how easily she delivered it. Like she was confessing to a diet cheat. Like I was an obstacle she'd outgrown, not a person who'd built a life with her from the ground up. I remember looking at her and realizing that the woman in front of me wasn't the woman I married. That version of her, the one who held my hand at the hospital when my mother died, who kissed my forehead when I was too tired to stand, she was gone. Replaced by someone I didn't recognize. The kitchen was quiet except for the ticking clock and the hum of the refrigerator. The sun had just started creeping through the blinds, painting lines across the counter like prison bars. She sipped her tea like nothing had changed. Everything had. She didn't say his name at first. Just he. Like it was enough. Like it should be obvious. But when I pressed, when I finally found the strength to speak, she hesitated. Just for a second. Then she said it softly, almost like she was sparing me. And everything inside me collapsed. It was him. Of course it was. My boss. My mentor. The man who gave me my first real break, who taught me how to navigate the chaos of the industry. We used to joke that he was the big brother I never had. Late nights in the office, road trips to conferences, bar tabs he always insisted on covering. I trusted him more than I trusted most of my own family. I introduced them. I remember the night, a firm dinner at some rooftop place she loved. I brought her along because we were newly married and she wanted to meet the people I spent all my hours with. He charmed her, of course. He charmed everyone. It was part of his power, the effortless charisma, the way he made you feel seen. But I never thought twice. I invited him to our wedding. Sat him near the front. He toasted us. Told me how lucky I was to have found a woman so sharp, so beautiful, so clearly out of my league. Everyone laughed. I laughed. And now he was in my home. Not physically, not yet, but through her. In the shadows of our bed. In the back seat of that car. In the lies she told with a straight face. 8 years I worked for him. 8 years I defended his decisions, stayed late for his projects, traveled last minute for his whims. And all that time he saw my life. He saw her. He knew what she meant to me. And he still made a move. Still took her. I stood in the middle of the hallway gripping the banister like it was the only thing holding me up. I could hear her moving around the bedroom upstairs, drawers opening, closet hangers shifting. Casual sounds as if everything hadn't just exploded beneath us. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just betrayal. It was betrayal with intent. With intimacy. This wasn't some faceless stranger or some reckless impulse. This was a man who smiled at me while chiseling away at the foundation of my life. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, drowning in the silence of a house that no longer felt like mine. Every corner of it had his fingerprints now. Not because he stepped inside, but because she let him in. It wasn't dramatic. There were no slammed doors, no shouting matches echoing through the walls. She didn't cry. Neither did I. She simply walked into the bedroom, pulled her suitcase from the closet, and started folding her clothes. Like she was getting ready for a weekend trip. Like it was just another errand. I stood in the doorway, unmoving. My arms hung useless at my sides, heavy like they belonged to someone else. She didn't ask me to help. Didn't glance at me. Just folded, zipped, slid drawers open and shut. Methodical. Detached. Her eyes scanned the room like it was already unfamiliar to her. And then, without looking up, she said, "I've made my choice." Simple words. Quiet ones. But they landed with the weight of a wrecking ball. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. The choice wasn't just about him. It was about leaving. About walking away from everything we'd built or tried to. About closing a chapter and pretending the pages that came before it didn't matter. I could have said something. I had 100 things to say. Questions that still clawed at me. Memories that begged for answers. But none of it came out. Because the truth was, I'd already lost her. Long before this moment. All this time I kept waiting for a crack. A break in the surface that would let the old version of her slip through. The one who used to light up when I walked into a room. The one who'd reach for my hand without thinking. But that person wasn't coming back. So I just watched. Watched her close the suitcase and lift it off the bed. Watched her check her reflection in the mirror, adjusting a strand of hair like she was heading to a meeting. Watched her walk down the stairs, every step echoing like a countdown to something final. She opened the front door, paused for a second, not long enough for second thoughts, just long enough for silence, and then she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her. And just like that, it was over. No apology. No confrontation. Just the soft click of a door that felt louder than anything I'd ever heard. I didn't move for a long time. I couldn't. It felt like watching a building collapse in slow motion, all the beams and walls you once thought were solid turning to dust. You're left staring at the wreckage, still expecting it to hold. Still thinking maybe somehow it's not real. But it was real. She was gone. And the quiet she left behind didn't feel peaceful. It felt like absence. Like a ghost that was never coming back. The office lights felt too bright. The air too still. I walked past the front desk, past the usual Monday morning chatter, nodding silently to the receptionist who barely looked up. Everything looked the same, the polished floors, the hum of printers, the stale coffee smell, but it felt like walking through the remnants of something already dead. My letter was folded in my coat pocket. I'd typed it at 3 a.m. in the silence of a house that didn't feel like mine anymore. There was no poetry in it. Just a resignation. Direct. Clean. I didn't even feel anger at that point. Not the sharp, burning kind. It had cooled into something heavier. A quiet finality. The end of something I'd once taken pride in. When I walked into his office, he looked up from his desk like I'd interrupted a good dream. Not startled. Just curious. "Nate," he said, smiling faintly. "You're in early." I placed the envelope on his desk without a word. He opened it, read the first line, and leaned back in his chair. He let out a slow breath, like he was disappointed but not surprised. "I hope you're not doing this over personal matters," he said after a moment. "I understand things can be complicated. But we're professionals. We don't let personal life affect business." He actually said that. Like what he'd done could be filed away in a drawer. Labeled unfortunate. Forgotten. I just stared at him. This was a man who once gave me a pep talk after I lost my father. Who handed me a promotion with a handshake and a joke about loyalty. A man who told me he'd built this company with people he could trust. And now he was sitting across from me acting like he hadn't detonated the ground beneath my life. I said nothing at first. Just let the silence sit there between us like smoke after an explosion. Then I said, "You crossed a line you can't come back from." His smile faltered for the first time. I turned around and walked out. Didn't wait for a response. Didn't want to hear another word from the man who took my trust and gutted it behind my back. The door clicked shut behind me. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Not because anything had been fixed, but because I'd finally stopped pretending it hadn't been broken. 3 months. That's how long it had been since the last time I saw her. Since the morning she walked out with a suitcase and a calm certainty I'll never forget. The house had gone quiet after that, not just in sound, but in spirit. It was like her absence left a vacuum, and in a way it did. Even grief made more noise than what she left behind. I spent those first weeks in survival mode. Wake up. Breathe. Move. Go to the grocery store and pretend the hollow space in the passenger seat didn't feel like a wound. Slowly, though, the numbness faded. The air didn't taste like ash anymore. I started sleeping through the night. I started rebuilding. Then one evening, my phone buzzed. Her name. After all that time, after all the silence, it was just there on my screen like it belonged. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. "He's not who I thought he was." That was it. 7 words. No context. No greeting. Just a crack in the wall she'd built between us. I didn't answer. Not right away. A few hours later, another message came. "I thought we had something real, but I was wrong. I was just one of many." There it was. The truth I didn't need, but still felt the sting of. The man she left me for, the one she smiled about while standing in the ruins of our marriage, had moved on. Found someone younger, shinier, and she'd been discarded like a brief inconvenience. There was no satisfaction in hearing it. No smug sense of karma. Only a hollow ache, like watching someone fall from a building you tried to warn them about. The third message came after midnight. "I'm sorry. I was stupid. I miss you. Can we talk?" That one hit different. Not because I wanted to say yes. Not because I missed her, too. But because it brought everything full circle. After everything she destroyed. After all the lies and silence and betrayal. She came back not with answers, but need. Like I was still the person who could hold her up when the world knocked her down. But I wasn't him anymore. I set the phone down and walked into the kitchen. Poured myself a glass of water, and stared at the quiet house. It didn't feel empty anymore. Felt mine. She was alone now, and I didn't need to rescue her from that. It was early evening when I saw her again. The sun hung low, casting a warm, golden haze over the park. Kids screamed across the grass. Dogs chased each other in lazy circles. It all felt strangely peaceful. too peaceful for what I knew was coming. She was already sitting on the bench when I arrived, clutching a coffee she wasn't drinking, shoulders hunched like she'd shrunk since I last saw her. Not physically, but in presence, in weight. The confident woman who once swept through our house with bags on her arm and a new lie on her tongue was gone. This version of her looked lost. She stood when she saw me, then froze, unsure if she should move closer. I gave a small nod and sat beside her. She followed. For a moment, we just watched the people pass by. The world didn't care about our story, kept turning. Then she broke. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know how bad it would feel. I thought I'd be happier. I didn't realize I was just temporary." Her voice cracked. Her hands trembled. And then came the tears, quiet, messy, real. "I miss you," she said. "I miss who we were." I didn't interrupt. I didn't reassure her. I just listened. That's all I had left to give. She looked at me then, eyes swollen, searching for something in my face. Hope, maybe. Redemption. A sliver of the man who used to wait for her by the window, believing her excuses. But that man was gone. I stood slowly, brushing the creases from my coat, and turned toward her one last time. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said, and I walked away. No anger, no performance, just the sound of gravel underfoot, growing quieter with each step. I didn't look back, because I didn't need to. That chapter, whatever it once was, whatever it pretended to be, was closed. And for the first time since the lies began, I felt light. Not triumphant, just free.